He ate fries, potato chips, and white bread for every meal. And that's basically all he ever ate since he was young. But something started to go wrong. You see, his nerves should have carried messages from his eyes to his brain, while a fatty coating protected them. But his diet didn't give his body what it needed to repair this fatty coating. And eventually, it got so thin on the nerve that controlled his vision that the messages never made it to his brain. And by 17, this caused him to go legally blind, all because of the junk food. The two penguins fell in love and spent 10 years courting each other, until one day she suddenly dumped him for a younger male. This broke his heart and left him completely alone in his old age. But when the zoo ran a promotion for an anime, they placed a cardboard cutout from the show in his enclosure. Now, it was a cartoon penguin girl, and as soon as he saw it, he stood there and stared at her for hours. And for months, he refused to leave her side. Now, he eventually got sick, and some say the cutout was brought to his bedside so that she was the last thing he saw as he passed away. Line a deep pan with the dough, then spread a little sauce around the outside edge and cover the bottom with a thick layer of shredded mozzarella. Then lay a second layer of dough over the cheese and pinch tiny holes all over the top. These holes let steam escape while it cooks. Then pinch the edges of the crust to seal it all together and trim off any extra dough. Finally, spread a thick layer of sauce across the top. Then bake it for 30 minutes, creating a stuffed Chicago-style pizza. Once a year, they open his tomb and use a sponge to soak up the liquid around the bones before squeezing it into a bottle. You see, the saint was buried over 1,000 years ago, but legend says a mysterious liquid appeared in his tomb and pooled around his bones. So his followers mixed it with holy water and gave it to sick people to heal them. When scientists tested it, they found it was mostly just water and minerals. But regardless, it's still used for healing to this day. The sacks would be inserted inside your wrists, with small openings right before your palms. Your bones would also be thickened with steel rods, and your joints reinforced with braces. Every time you ate, the sacks would spin the protein in your food, hardening it to liquid silk. And when you flicked your wrist, your muscles would flex, squeezing the sack to shoot the silk out. But even though it might stick to a building, it would probably just snap under your weight. If you bite a pistachio that won't open, the pressure can sometimes fracture your enamel, and using your fingers to peel it might hurt your skin over time. So instead, grab half of an old shell and wedge it into the thin line before twisting it sharply. This puts all the force on the weakest part, letting you crack it open in seconds. And if the pistachio is completely sealed, cover it with a towel and tap it with a heavy pan. An avalanche broke loose, rushing toward him. It buried him for 15 minutes straight. Now, he was eventually rescued, but when he tried to play Sudoku a few weeks later, his arms started shaking uncontrollably. You see, while he was buried, the lack of oxygen had injured his brain, and whenever he tried to picture the patterns, his brain blasted way more neurons than usual, which overloaded his body and sent him into a seizure. So even though Sudoku was one of his favorite hobbies, he had to give it up completely. His cat was tragically killed by a car, so naturally, he decided to skin it and preserved its hide with chemicals. Next, he built a custom frame with 4 propellers, then stretched the hide over it and positioned it so the weight stayed centered and the propellers could spin. At first, it tilted to one side, but when he adjusted the weight again, the cat finally lifted off the ground. He later did the same with a rat and an ostrich, turning them all into drones. When a shark attacks someone, it immediately makes the news. Because of this, you might think they're really deadly, but sharks only kill about 10 people each year. Now, snakes are much deadlier, killing about 10,000 times that amount. And humans are even worse, murdering about 400,000 other humans each year. But the true champion of death is the tiny mosquito. Its bites spread diseases that cause over 700,000 deaths every year, making it the deadliest animal in the world by far. The tubes are filled with water, which travels to a tank that sits on top of the boat. And when a candle is lit underneath, some of the water turns to steam, which creates an expanding bubble in the tank. This forces water out of the end of the boat. But since the pipes are cooler than the tank, the air shrinks again and moves back toward the tank, sucking in water from the lake. The air expands again when it heats up and shrinks once it cools down. And this constant movement pushes the boat along without any moving parts. He dunked them under the water, but he didn't see the crocodile creeping towards him as he moved to the next person waiting, and it shot out of the water towards the man. Its jaws bit into his back and legs as he tried to escape. Fishermen rushed in with nets and managed to pull the man away, but it was too late. By the time they reached him, he had already died. He stood neck deep in the ocean, waiting as the cold slowed down his heart. But when authorities arrived, they just stood on the shore and watched. They called the Coast Guard, but the boat never arrived. A woman tried to rescue him, but police told her not to. And even when the man collapsed, they did nothing. Finally, a civilian pulled him to shore, but it was too late. The family sued, arguing that authorities should have saved him. They said it wasn't their responsibility to save the man's life, and a judge agreed, throwing the case out. The donkey was spooked while hiking with his owners. At first, his owners tried to look for him, but they eventually gave up. And years later, a hiker spotted a herd of elk. They were all following the donkey. You see, he had joined their herd when he got lonely. But when he protected them from mountain lions, they accepted him as their leader, and he still wanders with the elk to this day. The ants climbed onto the plank, which was then loaded into a boat and shipped to a different country, where they started their own colony. And this happened countless times, until these ants were spread all over the world. But even after a century of living thousands of miles apart, their chemical smells are still super similar. And if you put together two of these ants from two different continents, they'll still act like they're from the same colony. They handed him a booklet filled with stories from his childhood, losing his first tooth, his trip to the beach, and his memorable birthday party. Now, the fourth memory was a story about how he had gotten lost in a mall at age 5. And over the next 6 days, he read the story again and again. He started to recall crying in a mall and being rescued by an old woman. But then his family told him the mall story was fake. Nothing about it was real. You see, by reading it over and over, his brain had filled in the gaps, showing how false memories can be planted. Make 2 folds on one corner, then repeat on the other side. Bring the top triangle down and lift the center point. Fold it in half, then fold one side back over. Bring the bottom up and crease it diagonally. Fold the top down, then press out the flaps to form a square. Open it up, creating the ears. Rotate it, fold the bottom up, then down diagonally to form the head. Reverse the folds, shaping the trunk and legs. Open it slightly and roll the ears outward to reveal an elephant. Nest potential eliminated. The sheep was born with stiff joints and a damaged spine, making it impossible to walk. But when rescuers took her in, they noticed something strange. She could control toys using her head and understood that her actions caused them to work. So they built her a wheelchair with a control stick, and when she moved the stick, it rolled forward. Soon she learned to drive it, moving wherever she wanted to go. Now, when kids visit, she drives up and plays with them. He built a cylinder out of Legos, adding a piston inside. Then he repeated this hundreds of times before stacking them together and connecting them to bottles of compressed air. Next, he built a shell for the outside before adding wheels on the sides. When the air was released, it rushed through the cylinders and pumped the pistons up and down, turning the gears and spinning the wheels with nothing but air. But the engine was a lot weaker than a normal car, so it was barely faster than riding a bike. They locked the chicken inside and tied the cage to the roof of the car. Now, if they drove into a deadly gas, the chicken would immediately die, warning the soldiers to put on gas masks. You see, the heavy pollution in the air clogged up their chemical detectors, and they kept randomly going off. But chickens are super sensitive to changes in air quality, so the soldiers bought over 40 of them. But the harsh desert conditions killed most of the chickens, and the plan was scrapped. If a human is buried underneath the rubble, but they're still living, their heartbeat will make tiny movements in their chest, while their breathing expands their lungs. This is enough to be picked up by the radar and detected by this special device. Even if the person is unconscious, it still sends a signal back, telling rescuers that someone is down there. He slipped through the bars of a second-floor balcony. His body fell through the gap, but his head got stuck, leaving him hanging in the air. People on the street saw him and rushed to stack nearby chairs into a tower. Then one man climbed up and grabbed the boy's legs, holding his weight to keep his neck from being crushed. For several minutes, he held him up until the boy's grandma got inside the apartment and pulled the toddler back up, completely unharmed. Take all +4 cards from the deck and place 3 normal cards down first. Then place down 1 +4 card and repeat that pattern 4 times. So every +4 card is separated by exactly 3 cards. Now place that entire stack on the bottom of the deck and shuffle the rest normally while keeping the stack at the bottom. Then move it to the top. So when the cards are dealt around the table, every 4th card goes to the same player, meaning every +4 lands in your hand. He was found dead on his bathroom floor with his pants around his ankles. And when the autopsy was done on him, legend says that he had over 30 pounds of poop inside him. Now, he had an irregular heartbeat, and he had been constipated for a long time. So some people think that when he was on the toilet, he strained so hard that it put pressure on his heart, which triggered a heart attack and killed Elvis Presley. He was arrested for killing a teenager, but he insisted he was at a baseball game that night. Even though he had his ticket stubs, the police weren't convinced, and the footage of the audience was too blurry to confirm anything. Then the man remembered a camera crew was filming a sitcom in the stadium that night, and when they looked through the footage, they saw the man sitting in the audience around the time the murder was happening miles away. His phone records also proved it was really him, and he was finally freed thanks to the sitcom. The live wire fell on him, sending over 7,000 volts through his body. He was so burned that he lost both his legs and one of his arms. And doctors had to replace huge patches of his skin. But this destroyed his sweat glands, meaning he couldn't sweat, which meant he couldn't cool down. Instead, he had to use an air conditioner constantly so he wouldn't overheat. But one day, the power went out, which meant the AC went out, and he was found dead the next day. Hammer your knife into the end of the stick, then make a second split to form an X. Next, sharpen the end into a point before pushing in a small twig, sliding it all the way to the bottom of the split. Now do the same with the other side, and tie a string around the bottom. Wind it tightly, then weave it around the twigs, tying them in place. And when you aim at a fish, the 4 points spread far enough to easily stab it. Both of the kids wanted the same bike, so one saved up money, working hard day after day until her pile slowly grew, while the other just borrowed money from every kid in school, meaning he was able to buy the bike right away. But this also meant he owed favors to everyone who gave him money. First, he carried backpacks for his classmates. Then he started giving them his lunch every day, just to keep paying them back. Months passed, and finally, the other kid had saved enough to buy her bike, with nothing owed to anyone. Meanwhile, the other kid was still working off his debt. In the end, they both got the bike, but he didn't have to wait, and she didn't have to owe. It just depends on what you're willing to compromise. If you grew a 1-year-old to the same size as Shaq, it would stretch up to 7 feet tall and weigh over 300 pounds. To feed it, you would need over 10 times the amount of baby food, with a jug of milk at every meal. And because it could pee up to 10 pounds a day, you would have to buy hundreds of XXL diapers to change it. But with a bigger mouth, it would have a much stronger bite, which could be dangerous. And if it tripped and fell on you, well, it probably wouldn't end well. If you could scale an onion to over 600 feet wide, you would need chainsaws to slice off the top, then flip it stem side down with huge cranes and cut it into 16 sections, pulling the layers outward with thick cables until it fully blooms. Next, use a helicopter to cover it with 800 tons of flour, before using fire trucks to spray on eggs and milk, and topping it with even more flour. Finally, fill a crater with boiling oil and lower the onion inside. When you take it back out, you'll have a blooming onion the size of the Colosseum, enough to feed almost 13 million people. When an elephant collapses, some herds stop walking and stand quietly around her as she dies, reaching down with their trunks and trying to lift her back up. But when she does finally die, they touch her body again and again, and will sometimes even cover it with branches and dirt. Now, weeks later, if they pass her bones, they will stop and gently touch them as a way to recognize her remains. He slammed a dead cat onto the table, right in the middle of a serious conversation. Now, everyone's focused on the cat, and the original conversation is forgotten. Now, this is called the dead cat strategy. If the news won't stop pushing a story, you start seeing it everywhere until before you realize it, you're focused on it too. Meanwhile, something quieter and more important slips by unnoticed. As you pulled the sweatshirt over your head, the neck opening stretched wider and wider, and with each wear, it slowly hung loose. So, manufacturers stitched in a stretchy triangle under the collar. It expanded with the opening. This spread the pull across the fabric, keeping the neckline in shape over time. And since sweatshirts were made for exercise, the triangle also sat where sweat built up on your chest, soaking up the moisture. But today, most sweatshirts just copy the triangle without the stretch, making it completely useless. He fell onto the tracks, and the train rolled over his legs, slicing them off. When he recovered, he struggled to work at his railway job, so he bought a baboon and brought it to work. It copied the man by watching him, and whenever the baboon heard the train whistles, it learned to pull the right levers, switching the tracks. After testing it for its skills, the railway officials hired it full-time, paying it 20 cents and half a beer. And for the next 9 years, legend says it never made a single mistake. Hammer in 3 nails, but not all the way. Then snip the heads off of each one and hammer them further through the joint until the metal sits deeper inside. Then place another nail on top and tap it with a hammer to push the nails slightly below the surface. Now put glue in each hole and wedge in wooden plugs. Saw the plugs so they're the same height as the board and sand the surface smooth, making the nails invisible. He squeezed the toothpaste out of the tube, racing to beat the other student. Thick lines spilled across the table, and within seconds, the tubes were empty. Then the teacher told them their next step. Put all the toothpaste back inside the tube as fast as possible, and whoever finished first would win. Now they started scooping it up, trying to shove it back into the opening, but it just smeared, slipping and spreading everywhere. The more they tried, the messier it got. After 10 minutes, both tubes were still empty, and the teacher explained, "You can try all you want, but some things just don't go back once you've let them out." His wife was sitting beside him. The kids were sleeping in the back seat. The road stretched, quiet and dark. Then headlights cut across the line. When he came to, they were gone. His family was dead because of a drunk driver, and he was all alone. Now, 20 years later, he's retelling the story for the 100th time to his psychiatrist. She had adjusted his medication many times, but nothing seemed to help. He was numb. He just couldn't enjoy life. So she suggested an experimental clinic that claimed it could completely erase specific memories. This would be perfect for him. He had been struggling with this weight for too long. He agreed, desperate to forget his trauma, signing all the waivers without hesitation. Anything to make the pain disappear. At the clinic, a nurse prepared him for the procedure, noticing his trembling hands and downcast eyes. Then the lead scientist asked him to recall every detail. The collision, the screaming metal, the silence afterward. He poured it all out so the machine could trace the neural pathways and find his memory. They sedated him and the procedure began. It was supposed to be quick, but the system kept failing to lock on to the memory. The screen showed inconsistent data. The scientist grew frustrated. They sedated him deeper, forcing the machine to dig harder. In the control room, the nurse began to research records of his family to try and help, but she couldn't find anything. There was no marriage record for him, no children, nothing. She found an article about the car crash, and to her horror, she saw the man's face in a mugshot. He was the drunk driver that night. He was the one that killed the family, and he was about to forget it all. If you press chocolate ice cream against vanilla ice cream, for some reason, it's like they perfectly transfer over without mixing. And this happens because they don't slide smoothly apart. The surfaces stick together. And as the ice cream pushes past each other, some of it starts stretching, forming a thin layer that clings to the other scoop. When the two cones get pulled apart, the layer tears, and you get left with matching patches that look completely unmixed. He climbed into the bed, and within a few hours, the patient lying there passed away. You see, the cat lived in a nursing home, and he would often nap next to patients. But the nurses noticed that whichever bed he chose, the patient usually died the same day. Now, some people think he smelled tiny chemical changes in the people about to die, while others think it was just a coincidence. But he predicted over 50 deaths. So much that the staff began calling families whenever he showed up, letting them say goodbye before their loved ones passed. Fold up a tea towel and wrap your thumb in it. Then lay it on the table and wedge the oyster under your thumb, with the hinge facing out. Push the knife between the shells and twist it to separate them. Then slide the blade around until the lid comes off. Finally, cut the mussel out of the shell and suck it out. But if a grain of sand had found its way into your oyster, it could be covered in a protective layer, which could have turned it into a pearl. So you should always check your oysters before swallowing them. If you draw a half circle with a radius of 1, the curved edge will measure pi. Now Now, if you split that curve into two smaller half circles, their curves will still add up to pi. Then split them again and again, making more and more tiny curves. Eventually, the shape starts to look flat, like a straight line that's twice as long as the radius. But the curves never actually become straight, because even when they get extremely small, those pieces are still curves that always add up to pi. He found a bowl of honey sitting on the road and decided to eat it as a snack. And the other soldiers found more, and they did the same thing. But soon after, they started vomiting and got terrible diarrhea. They even acted drunk, barely able to stand. You see, the bees in that area collected nectar from poisonous flowers, which transferred into the honey. And the enemy knew this. So he collected the honey before leaving it out to make the soldiers sick. And once they were weak, the army attacked, killing hundreds of confused men and winning the battle, all thanks to the honey. Cut a flat strip from the Amazon box and brush it with resin before layering it on top of more strips. Next, dip them in more resin, making sure every part is soaked, pressing them together with clamps. Wait a day for it to harden, then remove the clamps and cut the block into a blade shape. File the edge to make it sharp and sand it smooth. Now you have a box opener made from a box to open more boxes. He put on the glasses, which flipped everything upside down in his vision. And at first, he could hardly use his limbs. In a sword fight, he would aim up when he should have aimed down. But as he practiced, his brain started to turn the image the right way. So even when an object appeared at the top of his glasses, his hand reached down. After a few weeks, he could do everything normally. But when he finally took them off, his brain flipped that image upside down, meaning he was lost again, until his brain finally caught up a few minutes later. She noticed a layer of dirt on the art piece as she was cleaning the museum. And when she looked closer, she realized it was a water stain. But when the artist built the sculpture, he had carefully painted this spot to look like dried rainwater, since the piece was about rain. Years later, he died, and the sculpture was valued at over $1 million. But the cleaner mistook it for dirt and scrubbed it away until it was spotless, meaning it's now worth way less. Fold the paper diagonally both ways to make an X, before folding it in half lengthwise and crosswise. Then flatten out the paper before pressing it into a triangle. Next, flip up one corner and tuck it into the center, twisting it to make a wing. Repeat this for all sides and blow into the tip to inflate it. Finally, flatten out the wings to make a spinning paper balloon. His helmet had a radio inside. This allowed his dad to speak to him from a walkie-talkie because he couldn't see the field. You see, when he was younger, tumors formed in both his eyes. And by age 7, he was completely blind. But he still wanted to play football, so he learned every route. And before each play, his dad would describe the defense from the sidelines, helping him picture where everyone was while he ran the play from memory. And it worked so well that he became a quarterback. If you broke a thermometer on the plane, the mercury could slowly eat through the aluminum, where the metals could react together, breaking it down into weak, spaghetti-thin strands that can snap with almost no force. Left alone, it could tear a hole through the aircraft. But there's one catch. Aluminum protects itself with a layer of oxide, so unless it hits a scratch in the perfect spot, it probably won't do much damage.
বাবা, আপনি মহান বাবা।
আচ্ছা, আপনার কি মনে হয় না যে আপনি যাকে ভালোবাসেন, আপনি যে মেয়েটাকে এত ভালোবাসেন,
আমি তোর ভাবির বাসার সামনে তুই তাড়াতাড়ি লাগা দে তাবিজে লাগা দে।
আপনাদের তো চিনলাম না, আমার বড় বোনের যে দেবরগুলো আছেন তো সবাইকেই চিনি, বাট আপনাদেরকে তো চিনি না।
যাইতে দে তাহলে আমার খালা লাগে কোথায় বলতা ভালোবাসা যে এত প্যারা, এত কষ্ট, এত জ্বালা যন্ত্রণা জানলে ভালোই বাসতাম। জিসান আর তুলির ভালোবাসার ইতিহাস তাই রক্ত লাগবে দোস্ত।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম দুলা ভাই।
আরে শালা, ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম। কি খবর, কেমন আছো?
গলায় দড়ি লাগাই দিছে ভাবি।
গলায় দড়ি দিছি মানে গলায় 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 কেন রেখেছেন আমাকে?
কি খবর তোমাদের, কেমন আছো তোমরা সবাই? ভালো তো না? তুমি জানো তোমার কালকে তো কতবার বলছি।
হ্যালো, আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
ওয়ালাইকুম আসসালাম।
কি রে হৃদয় রহিন মানা করতেছি
কিছু হবে না, কিছু ভাবি। আপনি জানেন আমি একবার অসুস্থ হয়ে গেছিলাম, ও আমাকে রক্ত দেয়নি, আর আজকে আপনাকে রক্ত দিয়ে চিঠি লিখছে।
আমাকে বুকিং দিছে মানে আমাকে কে বুকিং দিছে দোস্ত? তোর যে আশিক আছে না, এখন তো আমার পিছনে লাগছে।
এই এই দুলাভাই সামনে থাকলে যে সালাম দিতে হয়, আপনি শিখাই নাই তোরা? কেমন আছো তুমি?
ভালো।
আমাকে জিজ্ঞেস করবো না? রক্তটা দিবি তুই?
আমি কেন রক্ত দেবো? প্রেম খরচ তুই রক্ত।
আমার বন্ধু জিসান আপনাকে অনেক ভালোবাসে ভাবি, আপনার ওর রক্ত যাওয়াটা বিধে হতে দিবেন না ভাবি।
কেন 073421924 এটা তোমার নাম্বার না?
জি জি, আপনি কেমন আছেন?
ভালো নেই, আমি ভালো নেই। আমিও তোর মতোই ভাবতেছি, রক্ত যদি দিঠা যায় না, রক্তটা
আপনার কাছে এইটা আমার লাস্ট রিকোয়েস্ট ভাবি।
আচ্ছা,
কখন আসবে তোদের ভাবেই আর ভালো লাগতেছে না আমার। সে যে কেন এলো
তুমি অনেক ভালো একটা মাইয়া, তোমার অনেক ভালো হবে।
আমার মা হাসপাতালে ভর্তি, ডাক্তার কইছে 2 ব্যাগ রক্ত আর 1 লাখ টাকা যদি আজকে
জন্য পাগল আর আপনি তানিয়ার জন্য পাগল।
আরে জুলি, এইটারে কয় ভালোবাসা। আরিয়া, তোমার হাতের রান্না।
তোমার বড় ভাইয়ের ভালো না থাকলে এখান থেকে চলে যেতে বলো।
আরে জুলি, তুমি আবার কি রাইখা কি
প্রেমে ফেলতে পারো, তাহলে আমি নিজে দাঁড়িয়ে থেকে তোমার আর তানিয়ার বিয়ে দিব।
সারাদিন ধরে ভিক্ষা করছে, আমাদের 1 লাখ টাকা আর 2 ব্যাগ রক্ত লাগবে। কি করবো বলো, আমি তো আর প্রফেশনাল রিক্সা চালক না, প্রেমিক রিক্সা চালক। আমার তাহলে ক কি লিখছস, কয় লাইন লিখছস ক।
সে কি তোরে খুব ডিস্টার্ব করতো? আরে না, আরে শোন না একবার কি।
আচ্ছা
ভাই আমাকে আপনার সাথে লেগে যান।
কাম তোরা, বুঝছি তো আমি, আজকে আমার বিজয়ের দিন। এখানে 100 কবিতা আছে, সার্ভিসটা তো একটু আলাদা থাকবে, তাই না?
দেখেন আমি কলেজে যাব, আমার দেরি হয়ে যাচ্ছে, এসব নাটক দেখা
আর কি ওই যে তানিয়া তো পড়াশোনা করে সন্ধ্যার সময় যদি একটু খায় মাথাটা ঠান্ডা। এই এগুলা কি? এই কার্ডের ভিতরে আমার মেয়ের নাম লেখা কেন? এই বাইরে মনে কর পিক করতে, বুঝছো? ওই যে আবার আছে বলছে